Hello everyone. This video is going to provide you with information on how to write an annotated bibliography and a little bit of background information about the purpose of the annotated bibliography. So first, I want to talk a little bit about what an annotated bibliography is and the purpose for one. So as you are all aware, you've been doing a little bit of background research, trying to gather attitudes, perceptions, beliefs about your particular topic. Furthermore, you've also been researching on how to narrow your topic based off of key concepts, ideas, terms, people, situations, events, things of that nature. Now, as you know, this information can be a bit overwhelming, and as I indicated in another video, organization is of the utmost importance. Now, the annotated bibliography serves as a space for you to begin to organize your ideas after reading the material. So this comes after you've gathered what you think is a sufficient number of sources. Now, it's important to keep in mind that what you have in your annotated bibliography doesn't necessarily find its way into your essay. Nevertheless, it still serves a purpose in giving you the information that you may need to revert back to just in case. And again, as I've stated numerous times, that as you are writing, you definitely will have some sort of outline and specific plan of action. But as you all know, ideas change, things shift, and we may need to go back to some of the sources that we left out and now have a need for them. So ultimately what it does is just, again, gives you some insight and reminds you of what you read. Naturally, this isn't a graduate program where you're required to remember everything that you read and commit it to memory and all of that. It is a lot of information to maintain, and so the annotations quite simply help you in taking the information that you might need from that article, specifically paraphrases, summaries, and direct quotations, and then inserting them in an article. So in a way, the annotated bibliography forces you, number one, to read carefully the article that you have. So whether it is a non-scholarly or scholarly article, it doesn't matter. That's going to be something that you incorporate into the annotation to remind yourself what type of source it was. It's also going to include the actual source for your works cited page at the end, so that way you don't have to do it after. It's simply a copy and paste job because you've already done the work. And finally, it is a opportunity to really carefully critique what it is that you're reading and then pull the information. As you know by now, the beam model asks you to use information or sourced material for different reasons. So this is the time, even though you conducted the background information chart and so forth, to put that information in and remind yourself what you're going to use it for. So in a sense, it's a one-stop shop of how you're going to take that information and then transfer it potentially into your paper. So with that being said, the annotation or the annotated bibliography are basically entries of the source material that you think you're going to be using for your actual paper. So what I'm asking for you to do, and as you look at this particular image here, when you pull it up, it's going to give you what is included in the entry. Okay, so for the first annotated bibliography, I'm asking you to include a minimum of 5 sources. So you're going to have to incorporate 5 particular sources, and then for the annotation bibliography part 2, you're going to include additional sources. Okay. So first and foremost, you're going to start with the citation. So if, some of you guys are doing APA, MLA, of course, the preferred method is MLA, but if you happen to be doing APA, that's fine too. Nevertheless, you're going to give the appropriate citation here. As I said before, if you end up using this source, it's helpful to do it now, so that way when you create your works cited or reference page at the end, then you already have that there for you. Next, you are going to include a short statement. This sometimes includes the author's purpose, right? So what the author's arguing, what are they doing? And the key words are important here in the sense of the verb. So do they examine? Do they analyze? Do they contend? Do they critique? Do they illustrate? That's going to tell you and remind you exactly what that author was doing as far as their purpose was concerned. And then, of course, naturally, your critique after if you feel the need to. Finally, you're going to include what maybe about a statement or two. Sometimes people like to get more in depth. The more, the better for you. Again, it's what you put in, to be honest, that's going to help you. Then next, you're going to have a short summary. So basically summarizes what the author does. So if it's a scholarly research article, more often than not, people are going to include either some of the methods, they're going to include what the findings were, and more specifically, they will include what the conclusions they drew for that. The reason for those three key points in a scholarly article is generally methods are critiqued, right? So it reminds you what they did. Just because something is published in a scholarly work doesn't make it good, okay? So that's something to consider. And then, of course, the findings. So the findings is what they use to draw the conclusions that they did. So this reminds you of that. If it's a popular source, a non-scholarly article, for instance, then you're just going to summarize generally the main arguments and, of course, some of the main claims that they do. This section, where it includes the summary, often includes like direct quotations that you think are going to be helpful for you, things that you feel that you'll need to pull and may potentially incorporate into your paper. Okay, so whether it's statistics or information you need, that's where you'll want to put it. Then you'll have some usefulness. Sometimes people critique this in a sense here, but section 5 is mostly for that. Nevertheless, it's again considering the B model. How will you use this? What's it going to be useful for as far as its relevance to your paper, or maybe not the paper as a whole, but perhaps maybe one of the sections in your argument, if it's the background paragraph. Or whether or not it's to introduce it for your counterclaim. So you might indicate a sentence like that and say, this will be good for my counterclaim because, and then you kind of intertwine the information and your plan in a sense. Finally, the last paragraph is going to include an evaluation. Okay, so how is this useful for you in the sense of critique? Is it useful for the topic? How will it assist any criticisms you might have, weariness, whatever commentary you have or evaluative comments on your end, okay? So naturally, this is a much smaller version of the entry. Generally, the annotations are much larger than this, but for the sake of example of all of these in one space, it's short. So for the example, I'm going to show you a one that I used back in 2012 when I was in graduate school. Nevertheless, this is a sample annotation bibliography that we had to do for our research, and you can see the same concept here. You have your works cited. This is an MLA, and then you'll see that the paragraphs are there. So I provide what the author does. They discuss an issue that revolves around methods available in teaching and rhetorical invention and so forth. Hageman claims, Hageman maintains, offers, away. So again, the verbs are important there. Next, you have a little bit more information. These are the specifics. Now I start getting into citations that I think I might be able to use for my paper. At this point, you don't necessarily know, but if you're pulling it out, there's a reason for that, okay? So finally, then, as I said, as far as any critiques or anything like that, you'll include those there, and then the usefulness of the article. So how might it be helpful for my paper? In this example, you can see that it provides an example of how classical rhetorical theory is used within teaching of reading and writing in the composition classroom, particularly through the use of progeum nasmata. So in this example, I'm giving specifics of what that technically what that paper was about, and using, as you see here, Cicero's and Quintilian's work and so forth. So I'm going to be drawing specifically on those two aspects, even though some of the article incorporated other elements. So you can see that it's about, a page and a half to. Now, of course, this is a little bit more intense because that's what I wanted to do. This was me wanting to put in the work beforehand so that the process of actually writing later would be easier. And of course, you can see that, it's a lot of information and very much specifics, right? So that's kind of the essence of it. What you'll do then is a continuation. So you'll see here, you'll just put in the next entry, and it'll be noted by, of course, the MLA citations. Same thing here. And then again, you'll see very much the same. And then another citation here once again. And then you'll continue on until you have 5, okay? Now, this is as much as you want to put into it, to be honest, and I'm looking for the very least that you have identified all of those parts within that particular sourced material. It doesn't matter to me what source material you use. Again, this is your process. The work that you put in is the work that you're going to get out of it. So I'm merely going to be evaluating and checking to see that you have read and understood and articulated very clearly your understanding of that text and any potential criticisms that you might have, okay? So once you have that, you are simply going to submit this file for me, and then I will review the text and then offer any potential suggestions. If I feel like you're kind of on the right track, then I'll just mark it complete. If there's anything else that I need to add or it might be helpful as far as like something for critique or something to maybe be weary about in what I see in your writing, then I'll go ahead and note that in the comments section. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. Finally, I just want to remind you for the annotations part 2, you are simply going to continue the same file. So literally, you're going to add on to this list. So you originally for part 1 will submit the 5, and then you'll add on to that 5 for part number 2. So you'll have several pages that you'll be submitting, okay?